think there's a lot of people out there listening, if they've come out or are not telling anyone, but having the feelings, you know, and then also grown up in the church, what that can do to you. And
yeah, and I think it's not just gay, right? There's religious trauma around
100%
sex. So, you know, like you and I were raised very much in the smack in the middle of the purity movement, and how damaging that has turned out to be for so many people. Because for me, when I came out, it was, of course, it was challenging, and my family, and, you know, it was hard and blah, blah. But I never went through, thank God, I never went through that process of like, oh my gosh, does Jesus not love me? I just didn't. I don't know how I managed to weather that without that question. Right. But that was the one question I didn't have. It was like, of course he loves me.
I didn't have that question either.
Yeah, and so that piece, which I think is...
It's the fear of the people and the Christians, and the church, not really Jesus and God.
There are people that go through that
100%.
as their first iteration.
No, I was just saying mine wasn't. And I can't say there was never any thoughts about it, but it was always Jesus. Well, never a thought of Jesus loved me.
Right.
There was a time where it was, does Jesus love me anyway? That makes sense. So there was a time where it was like, I wouldn't read the Bible. I didn't want to have anything to do with the scriptures.
Sure.
And it was, well, he made me, this is how I am, and he loves me. But maybe he just loves me even though, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget someone sending me some material, some books and some scripture, the exact scriptures that I was struggling reading and that people had kind of put upon me. They sent me where it had been studied again, and books and showing where you could actually read those scriptures and see when you really put the context and put all the and that changed my life because I could look at the Bible again.
I think, I mean, I went through some of that as well, but it was more like my faith was much more expansive than yours much earlier, right? So I started to deal with the Bible less literally way earlier than you did. Right. And so for me, I would read it and I'd be like, I don't really understand why that's here, what lesson we have to learn from it. But it was never deeply personal to me, right? But there was a certain shying away from like, I don't really need to hear it. I really
you didn't want to go to church.
It. Oh, I stopped going to church. Yeah. There was no going to church.
And I did not. But
that was the people. That was the people. That was not Jesus.
Right.
So and there are moments to this day where like my office has we have vomited wedding pictures onto the walls of my office. So it's like Loydeen and me and our kids and our wedding and then our other wedding and then another photo shoot with wedding dresses. And I mean,
it's like have not been shown yet, but you will. I cannot wait to vomit the wedding for all of you.
Exactly. But anyway, and so clients will talk to me on the phone, and I don't involve my personal life in my client discussions. I don't find it professional. So they'll come in, and all of a sudden they're smacked in the face with the fact that I'm gay, and they don't. There's no reason for them to know that ahead of that moment, which is fine. Like I don't feel the need to hide it either. And then but I still have that moment, that coming out moment, where I'm like, oh, how do they feel about gay people? Am I gonna get fired? You know, and I want to be. Like if they don't like gay people, then I should be fired, and that's okay. But there's always that moment, and I think that's just the cruelty of people, right? Yeah. People are cruel, and I think that's why it's so important to come out. But going back to like, it isn't. I don't think it's just about being gay. Like yes, there is that layer, but I think trauma is like that, right? Where there is a way that you are built and that you experience the world. And then that comes up against, for the very first time ever, maybe when you enter TK or whatever, right? That not everyone sees the world that way. That's a little bit of trauma. It's a little bit of like, oh, I got to adjust. I have to manage. And then
what's TK?
Training kindergarten, like the one before. You
know,
whenever
we call it preschool.
Oh,
pre-K.
Pre-K. In California, it's TK.
Oh, interesting.
You live here. No.
Not in Oregon.
But, so there's those little things that make us who we are. And some of those little tiny scars are the reasons that we build up these, walls around ourselves and these little protective parts, right? And all of that, I think, can be labeled trauma, right? Because it is But I think it's these big like experiences that you almost, they're so pervasive you can't avoid them, right? So it's this idea of the purity culture that so when we were coming of age, and by that I mean like when people start to have their first sexual experiences, when people start to have their first kisses, what their crushes, that hormonal experience, that like sexual sin was the ultimate. I mean, you could blaspheme God and be okay, but if you had sex before marriage, you were fucked.
Yeah, even though they wouldn't, because I grew up in a family that, and it was very much, there's decades between my siblings and I, and so growing up, I knew what they were taught and raised, and then of course my mom was, really well known, and both my parents actually in the Christian world internationally, and so, and especially nationally, and so it was very much in, not only just with my siblings, in my youth group, in this church thing that I was involved in, that was nationwide and international, that I was involved in hugely, like where I would do things on the state level and put on board. I mean, it was for youth, so youth would be on boards, youth would be president, youth would speak. So it was very, there was a lot that I was involved in front of hundreds and thousands of people. And so I can tell you that my entire growing up years, and it carried with me into adulthood, was no matter what I knew about the Bible, I was raised, even if they wouldn't admit it, that the number one sin was sex before marriage.
Yes.
Like there was nothing
you could do that was worse than that.
And I don't know if my siblings or one of my sisters would argue that, but I'm telling you, I heard more about sex before marriage from the people in my family and from my youth group and from my church than I heard about any other thing in Christianity.
Yes.
I mean, I feel I heard about it more than Jesus dying on the cross.
Oh, 100%.
Raising again,
yes.
Eternal life. Like, it was sex before marriage. Do not have sex before marriage, do not have sex before marriage, do not have sex before marriage. That person had sex before. I mean, it was so unbelievable.
Gross. So gross and pervasive.
And it would be to the point that then when I went to a private Christian college, it was all that was talked about.
Yeah.
So it was then also in my university, because it was a culture, because it wasn't just my family or my church, it was a culture that is all that was talked about 90% of the time. It really impacted me, so much so that I was gonna look up this word before we did this and I forgot about what it caused me to have. And now I feel...
Do you want to look it up?
Yeah, I should look it up.
I mean, I'll speak while you're looking it up. I think that, maybe it was because that culture that grew up in, they were like, well, they're already here, so they know about Jesus' death. And they're already here, so they know about some of these basic tenets of faith. And so we're going to stick to behavioral issues that we can mitigate, right? And so maybe that was the hyper focus on that thing and the reason it eclipsed all other things. But the experience of that, right, as a growing up wanting to be a good Christian, wanting to get that right, it became so like obsessive about sexual purity, that I think that there are multiple decades of people, Christian young people, that have like a completely screwed up view of sex and a completely challenging healing process in order to enjoy sex the way that it was designed to be enjoyed, right? So
yeah, so I remembered the word, but I don't know that I know how to say it. Vaginismus.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that either.
Okay, so I think it's called vaginismus. It's vaginismus. So I started having to go to doctors because I knew something was wrong. And I had heard this kind of talked about a little bit. A lot of when I was going to male gynecologists, because that happened to be what I had, that was just more trauma. I had one that...
You have to explain what it is, because people aren't...
So I'm just going to kind of read. The condition where a woman's body involuntarily prevents vaginal penetration due to mental trauma is called vaginismus.
Oh, that's good.
This condition involves the pelvic floor muscle tightening or spasming, making it difficult or impossible to tolerate penetration. It can be caused by physical, psychological, or a combination of both factors. So I went to a male gynecologist and talked about, I was like, I don't know if I need to. I mean, there was talks about me having surgery. It got that bad. And then there was warnings if I had surgery that the infection and the healing process would be so bad that it could cause me lifelong problems. And so definitely decided not to do that. But it was so bad, and I did not know what was wrong with me, because it would not matter if I was relaxed or alone or feeling safe, or, I mean, size, nothing would matter. Like I was like, there is a problem. It wouldn't matter if I was, turned on, like nothing mattered. And so I was really struggling and seeking doctor help. And I had a male gynecologist that berated me and
that's always a good idea, by the way. Let's
yelled
do that
at me
twice.
And was rude to me and obviously just didn't get it. So I went to then switched over. I mean, I left a bad review and then went to a female gynecologist and started to learn. And it was very hard for me to accept that this was the problem, because I don't know how to explain it when someone's telling you that something is mental, but it's physically happening to you. It's so confusing, because mentally I was like, no, I want this. Because I was bi and dating both women and men at the time. And I was like, but it was physically happening without getting too graphic or detailed, to the point that it was as if my body had a zip tie inside it that was pulled all the way to where it could not be, unless it was physically cut, it was zip tied. And gynecologists would actually feel inside me, could feel the zip tie and could feel. That's why at one point surgery was talked about, because there was such a zip tie situation that it could not be expanded or broken. And so it was very hard for me to accept that was mental, when there was a physical thing that doctors or anyone I was with could come up against and realize, and that there was no push through it. Had I pushed through it,
You've been hospitalized.
I would have been hospitalized. And they said, and there were people that did have that happen, where the only way is if you literally have your body ripped open. And so there was just no getting through it. And I have a very high tolerance of pain. It wasn't getting through a painful thing. Like, it was very painful, but there was I would have had to black out, like that kind of pain. And so it was very traumatizing for me, because I had women in my family that enjoyed sex so much with men and had not ever come across this. And Heidi always talks about my brain, because I'm always like, why is this the one that, and she's like, you went through this purity culture, and you can explain what you mean, why it wasn't surprising to you that this happened to me mentally. But
well, I just think that, like, certain people, Loydeen in particular, the way that they encounter the world is very literal, very present, very immediate, right? And so that immediacy, so there's not this like expansive, I wonder if, there's just, this is what is. And it's a personality type. I don't know the Enneagram or any of those things, so I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it is assigned to a specific personality type. It's very different from mine, right? I take information in, I toy with it, I turn it around, I dissect it, I take pieces I like and discard the rest, whether that's it's accurate or not. I just, just my brain does that. I play with things, right? Loydeen's brain does like, oh, this is what is, so I will function as if this is what is. And I think in that environment, and there's not that that's the only environment mentally that would be traumatized in this way by this disorder, but it's, we laugh about it in like manifesting, right? Because you're just like, don't sell me a pipe dream, right? And I'm like, oh, give me all the pipe dreams. I'm just gonna let those things marinate and happen. But you want like, here is how we get to this place that we're gonna get to, and then I'll take those steps and I will do those things and I will live as if that is happening, which is a very powerful tool for manifesting. I don't know how much we believe about manifesting. I have no idea. I'm not teaching manifesting. Although if you know how to do it, please call me because I want to learn. But your style of that is very much like, if it doesn't make sense to me, right?
Yeah, it needs to be logical. It needs to have a plan. It needs to be
immediate.
And it's funny because I am a dreamer, but it has to be. I don't want to just hear about dreams. Like, I don't want someone to say, I'll just use a stupid example, like, we're going to make $10 million next week.
Ooh, please, we're going to make $10 million.
That'd be great, but if I don't think that there's any way that could happen, or there's any plan, or, we're not playing the lottery, then I don't...
As far as she knows.
I don't want to hang... I don't want to get my... Like, I want it to be... where we're working towards, like, I want to have big dreams, and I don't want them to be small. I want them to be huge, and we do have big dreams, and we are going towards those. But I want it to be where we're going towards them and doing active steps, and where I can see that we are on our way, not that it's just this pie in the sky and there's no,
So I think because of that impulse that you have, this immediacy, this, I don't want to say black and whiteness, but maybe, right? This like, this is and this is not sort of mentality. When you decided that it was time to have sex, and because you weren't living within the parameters that you had been told that sex was allowed within, your body was just like, nope, fuck you. Like, we're not doing it. And because of, and so there was this mind-body disconnect. And, I've read that book, right? Like the body keeps the score. Yeah. Trauma exists in your body. Even if you have not dealt, especially, I think, if you have not dealt with the trauma, that mind-body connection is so powerful and so misunderstood and so scary, because you just cannot, for the life of you, understand, why am I in fight or flight? Why do I have vaginismus? Why do I have this attachment disorder, right? All of those things are because your mind and body are disconnected. Your mind is in one place. You've developed, you've evolved, you've moved, you've made new decisions, you've encountered new information, but your body is stuck in that, basically that lizard brain portion, right? Which is, and the problem is, this is a vaginismus is a documented problem for married women as well, right? So this is not just because you did not get married.
Well, that was what I wanted to bring up, is that I believe, usually this would be something that I would talk to one of my siblings about, but I firmly believed if I would have talked about it, whether it was said out loud or not, probably would have been said out loud, but definitely it would have been thought, oh, that happened to you because you tried to have sex outside of marriage.
Or it
had you waited, and it would have been on your wedding night, and this would not have happened. And I'm here to tell you, I can't prove it, because I'm not going to go marry a man to show you.
Please don't.
But I guarantee you that is not the case.
Well, it's bullshit, because it is literal 100% bullshit, because there are documented cases of married women who do that whole, I'm not even going to kiss you until I get married to you thing, which, by the way, also bullshit. Stop doing that. Stop saying it's important. Stop it. But anyway, they get married, and then horror upon fucking horrors, they cannot consummate their marriage without excruciating pain, medical procedures. So I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck if you would have gotten married to a dude and had sex. It still would have happened, because the trauma is so you had a bunch of nice pictures and you said I do in front of a bunch of people, and now all of a sudden you have to flip a fucking switch when your whole life, from the time that you stopped being a little kid, preteen, right? Just before everything got kind of confusing and scary with all your hormones and all of that, they started to tell you that this is a cardinal sin, something that could send you straight fucking to hell. Okay, now you take that and all the confusion of, is it literal, is it not literal, that you do when you're 11 and 12 years old, right? And then when you're 12 and 13 year olds, where you're like, oh my God, my body's telling me to do something that's a sin. I must be bad. I must be dirty. I must have a problem. I'm a Jesus believer. How come the sin is eclipsing my life because your hormones are, so each of those phases where you're like scared out of your mind because you don't know if it's a literal problem or, whatever in that phase. And then you go into this hormonal phase where you're fighting the impulses in your body, not just because you'd like to wait or, there's some safety issues or you're not mentally or emotionally mature enough to experience that experience, but because it is a sin, and not just a sin, but somehow an ordered sin where it's on the top of that fucking list and you cannot, I'm sorry, I'm sweating. I'm so mad about it. I get so angry about it. I was like when Heidi's mad. because it is so fucking damaging. And it's, we're getting better at it. But the truth is, so you take somebody and you put them through those paces, right? And the way that we were raised, you get put through that pace Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Usually there's a youth group function, and youth group functions, sure, you get to have pizza.
And we travel and do things all weekend. We do week-long camps. Yeah. So we do long weekend. We did it many times a year.
And it is so pervasive that there's not even questions. You don't even get to ask questions. So if you want to French kiss somebody and you're not sure if that's allowed, right? Oh my God, you don't talk about that with anybody. There's nobody that you can share that with. There's no adult mentor that can say to you. And I know your family was different about sex. You got to talk about it, but there was just this generalized
and kissing was okay. Yeah.
There was this generalized idea that it was going to just work. And I'm sorry, but that's lazy. That is lazy. That's saying I can trip through the world sprinkling trauma behind me and it'll all just work out. Sorry, but it doesn't. And, for me, sexual trauma really, again, I was very much more lucky, but again, it's because my brain just is oh, well, I must have just had that wrong. I must have misunderstood that. Yeah. And so my body's oh, good. Okay, we had it wrong. Right? And I can just let that go. Just the way that I did when it was oh, I'm gay? Well, Jesus still loves me. Nothing changed between my discovering that and yesterday, right? And so, oh, I'm going to have sex? Well, so because I think by that point I had kind of come to understand, I think gay is worse than sex before marriage.
Yeah, I mean, once I became gay, then having a sex before marriage wasn't really...
Well, because of course gay is worse than sex before
marriage. Yeah, that wasn't even talked about. In fact, I think it was...
It was so beyond.
I think my family just... I was just accepted and my family was accepted. It was more a problem when I wanted to get married. We were already living together and...
Dear God.
They knew we were having sex. So that wasn't even thought about anymore because now it was oh, we have a bigger problem. You're gay, so just don't get married because that's
it is interesting because my mom, sorry to
hurting God to get married as a gay couple or something.
But again, in my experience, it was the opposite, right? I'm sorry, I totally interrupted a really important point.
Don't worry about it.
My mom, when we told my mom we were going to get married, she literally said, oh, good, I was hoping you already were.
Yeah, please do. I thought you were married, or at least we hope
so. So for her, still, sex before marriage was worse than gay, right? Okay, you're gay, I get it, but please stop having sex before marriage. Yeah.
But she had to come on a long journey of accepting the gay, and she'd kind of gotten there with you.
I still don't think she accepts it. Well, I think that she's just okay, well, if you're going to be with somebody and it happens to be a girl, still... The sex before marriage
thank God
rules
we love
apply.
her. I mean, they love me.
Who wouldn't?
And I love them. I really knocked out of the park with the in-laws. But
I mean, I think both of our families are incredible families.
I'm obsessed with my family. Just so we're clear,
yes,
I'm a firm believer in. I know we get comments sometimes where it's very much you don't need them.
No, we do.
Just there's a lot of comments and people get to choose how they will. That is just not where I will be. I appreciate that people are we're your family now, you don't need them, but my family, one, they've come a long way, and they change holidays for my family. They came to my Heidi and my kids got baptized recently, which I just put that up on our YouTube, and was such a magical day for me. And my family came and they got off work and they traveled and they supported and they changed Christmases, and we travel, do vacations, and they literally, when we had, you know, visitation and custody with the kids, they would change holidays for that. I mean, they have really, they're on their journey and I'm on my journey, and we have found a way to do it with love and celebrating each other and supporting each other, even if they're not all the way there with accepting or understanding it all. They are like, they treat Heidi as my wife. Yes. They call us moms. They treat our kids and know that we're raising them. They love us. They aren't, you know, embarrassed to be seen with us. They put us a picture, you know. And so it would be hypocritical of me, because I was raised in that and I believed as they believed, and I had to go on a journey. And so why would I not allow them to go on a journey? This is a lot different than people out there, which unfortunately is true, where people get kicked out. Yeah. They are made homeless. Yes. They are told they're going to hell and that Jesus wants them to be cruel and mean and hateful. That is a whole different story, and that is not what I am living or have had to live, thank God. And so that obviously...
Yeah, we don't advocate.
No, and when people are making those comments, toxicity. I appreciate the comments, because I know that people come from knowing that side and knowing, and so I'm very grateful. In fact, I don't know if I've ever told the story, but I had someone, my parents have passed away, and I had someone go on my Facebook and pretend to be my dead parents. And it was very confusing.
Oh, I'm like, my heart rate is...
It was very confusing for me, because I'm with friends watching a movie, and I'm like, guys, we got to pause the movie because my dead parents are, you know... Messaging me on Facebook. I should probably read it. And this person was pretending to be my parents and said, literally it said, the reason I thought it, you know, is I get this message that says, "Hi, Loydeen, this is your mom and dad." And I'm like, whoa. And then it was to basically spew hate and say, "This is your mom and dad, and we are disappointed in you and disgusted by you, and God is disgusted by you." And, you know, it was like this whole thing, and with scriptures and then I realized, I found out from one of my siblings that she was contacting everyone in my family, this person, and doing this to basically rally everyone to hate me. And so I reached out to my sister, because I was like, it was when I had recently come out and we weren't talking about it a lot, but I'm like, I have to tell you because you're going to get a message. And I didn't want her to feel the shock that I felt. And she, from the beginning, when we were still in the very new stages of figuring out how to navigate this, said, I will, you know, I do not agree with, and I will not co-sign with hate. I am sorry that you have had to experience this. I will not allow this into my life or ever, you know, come on board with this to be in your life. And this person is wrong. Mom and dad love you. Jesus loves you. This is absolutely horrific. I mean, she just handled it like a champ. And it really healed something in me, because it was obviously very painful when this person did this. Because then, of course, I was very gracious in Messenger and just said, you know, you've crossed the line. Like, don't talk to me this way. Like, I don't need to block you, but I'm just telling you, like, my parents love me. And she wouldn't stop, so I blocked her on Messenger. And so then she went on my wall and publicly did it on my Facebook. Unbelievable. So then I just blocked her. But anyway, so all that to say... let
me just say, that's a greater sin than having sex before marriage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's...
If we hierarchy sins, and I don't think we do, but if we did, that one trumps.
So, to kind of wrap up my story, with the vaginismus, or however you say it, I went to doctors, I tried many things. It did not keep me from having sex before marriage, but it was just with a lot of navigating and not, you know, going as it should. And I tried a lot of things. It was painful for the men as well, and so we would try things. And then I knew pretty early on after coming out that I saw my life with a woman for marriage and for the rest of my life. And so, and I, unlike some people, they can't even put in a tampon. They can't handle anything, any penetration, fingers, anything. But mine was not to that level, luckily. And so being with women was never a problem. And so I just kind of was like exhausted from trying all the things, and had been able to, you know, experience with men as much as I could. And so I was just, you know, kind of just put it to bed, so to speak. But definitely when I would read about it later on and some people struggling with it, I was like, it would still be something I would struggle with if I was dating men and heterosexual. It would still be a problem. And so I'm, you know, when I see it in articles, I definitely read about it because I'm like, this is something I have, even if I don't have to deal with it in my daily life. It is something that I, you know, have this trauma and would have to do a lot of work to, you know, have one of those relationships to stay in it, which is scary and
horrific.
Really. Yeah, and it also, I started to realize just when I started reading about all these studies and the purity culture and the things and the damaging and the things that have come out of it, and hearing about all these victims, and realizing that I was one of them. And I was just so shocked, you know, because, you know, you grow up and just think, you know, you hear the horror stories of people that have went through being molested and all these things. And so in my mind, you know, I didn't, thank God, have to go through that, and have been through many that have and been there for them. And so I just didn't ever, you know, me being a victim, that just didn't make any sense, right? And so hearing all this, it made me realize, because it was so kind of confusing to realize that I didn't know I was gay my whole life, when so many people know. I mean, they just know. Or there's, you know, and I could look back and see all the signs, but I had no clue. But then kind of realizing how my brain worked, what I was taught, what I grew up in, because I always knew, like, oh, that just wasn't an option for me. But it wasn't like I had thoughts. It's not like I would look at a woman and have like a little thought and be like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel that. You know, it was just like not there. And so it was very confusing when then all of a sudden I started realizing it, because it's like, why, when I look back, I see all these signs that I have no idea. But it was beyond just, oh, you're not supposed to feel that way. It was with my brain, it just like the sex thing, it's like it was just shut off, as if like it does not exist. Like it can't exist. My brain wouldn't even allow me to have thoughts to try to figure it out. And then when I looked back at my life and saw all the signs, it was like, I almost felt silly, right? Like, why didn't I know? And that's why other people didn't question it, you know, because I was so convinced that that was not even I would never even allow that to be.
Right.
When someone's so confident and so boy crazy and so this is how it is, then why would anyone else, you know?
But I think this, you know, is an important thing to say, right? Is that I think both of us would describe our childhoods and even our junior high hoods, right, in high school, our high school youth groups and things like that, as something we cherish, something that was amazing for us, something that, you know, like I grieve not being able to raise our children, in a like a church-filled youth group and all of that, because of how a lot of like the mainstream youth groups treat gay families. But
yeah, it was I mean, I had the greatest growing up.
And right? I think having said that, it's important to say it was still trauma.
Yeah.
There was still trauma that came from that. So it doesn't have to be molesting, which is obviously trauma, or rape, which is horrific, or any of those things, right? I think it's important, if something isn't working for you, if something's not going right in your body, right? Like Loydeen's experience with going to an asshole as a gynecologist first, you just keep advocating. This isn't right. This isn't how this should feel. This isn't how this is supposed to go. Keep advocating for yourself, because there is a mind-body connection to trauma, even if that trauma doesn't register for you as, you know, like, oh, that was traumatic, right? Because the pervasive nature of the purity culture is what traumatized a lot of us in terms of our view of sex or having a healthy relationship to sex. Now they call it sex positive or whatever, right? But there was none of that. Like sex positive was only this one rigid definition, and that the pervasive nature of that, even though it was done through youth groups where it was fun and exciting and idyllic, it was still very traumatic. And I think that is something that we're still understanding. And I think that, like, as you get to know yourself, right, and of course as you age, you get to know yourself better and better, because you start to just be curious about what other people's experiences are, I think, right?
Well, and it's not talked about a lot, right? Like, there's all these people that were going through this, and you would have to dig deep still to find it.
I think even someone as confident as you and as open and public as you, this was hard to...
Well, this was the first time I've ever talked about it.
Well, and you weren't super comfortable.
No, I was like, oh, today's the day. I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Well, and
it's deeply private, and...
Yeah, so it's like you have to really still do a deep dive to, it's just not something that people feel comfortable. They feel embarrassed. They feel not normal. They feel,
something's wrong with me.
Broken.
I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Clearly, I've just taken this benign message and all of those things are going to come up.
Well, and, we talked about how I was told at one point, and I was already an adult, but I was told, this person was like, I'm never going to masturbate because my friends told me that they masturbated and now they can never, be satisfied in sex without it. And it kind of ruined that. And I was like, I was already an adult. So I was like, well, that doesn't add up for just like a blanket statement, because I can tell you, my friends and I are very open to talk about sex, and I can tell you many people that have amazing sex life and masturbate, and that's not an issue. But that doesn't mean that wasn't true about the
person who shared that.
1 or 3 people that shared that. But the point was, it made this person make a blanket statement out of it of, if you do that, then this will happen. And so it's just it was just that realization for me that there are so many things out there. You hear so many stories about, back to that movie thing you talked about. You watch movies and sex is just, I grew up watching rom-coms, and romantic films were my favorite. I'm obsessed with them. And so I grew up just my family being open about sex and, women loving sex. And so I grew up that's just how it is. A woman and a man come together, they have sex, it's amazing, it's the greatest thing that's ever been created by God, and it just goes well. And there's this realization as an adult from friends and sharing that there's a lot of people that struggle, a lot of heterosexual, couples where there's a lot of women that struggle. It's why the fake orgasm is such a thing, where it is not this easy, just come together and everything works for all couples. And I think a lot of people struggle because they're like, why are other people just having an easy time? And it's so hard, and it's not something people want to talk about, but there is no just blanket statement. It is, everyone has to figure out for themselves and work together as partners and, and it's okay. And it's okay to go get help for that. It's okay to talk about, and it's okay to...
It's important.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah.
Because I think people keep a lot, and again, like the American culture is very less open, right? Those are private things. Those are, and so I think there's a movement now to make it more talked about or more acceptable, but it hasn't been the case. And so I think that there's a deep level of shame that comes with something that has to be secret. And, so I think we could do 3 hours on trauma with, our culture, our religion, our, the fact that we came out, the fact that, like there's hours worth of, information that just our personal experience we could share. But I do think it's important that everybody takes themselves seriously, right?
I think I just realized in my brain, I was like, you know what? Another thing I thought when I was told that about the masturbation thing is that it is true for those people that they were struggling, but I don't necessarily believe that just because they had decided that that was the reason.
That was the reason.
Yeah, that was the reason. I think that's a very healthy thing to do. And I don't think it is why that they were, assigning this, But people don't talk to their doctors or go find out. It's just that
people make meaning.
They make meaning, and then it's like, well, this is why. And there could be a myriad of reasons of why that was not going well in there.
And the truth is, right, like there's so many different experiences with sex. And I think that all of them are valid.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can say what works for one person will work for another. And so it is, again, finding a place where you're safe and where you're accepted, and then where you're able to be honest.
Yeah.
And then figuring it out, right? And that doesn't have to be marriage.
Yeah. And luckily for me, the moment I started being with women, sex was amazing. Greatest thing in the whole world. So, and now I get to have a great sex life. So, it all worked out for me, but.
That's enough.
But yeah, I mean, I was like, wow, like, could anything be even better? So I was like, well, they're right. Sex is the most incredible thing, but it just.
Yeah. And again,
it's different than I'd been taught.
Yeah. And I think, again, everybody will have, gay, straight, coming out, not coming out, being bi, having different experiences, right? Everybody will have their own experience with that. I think you just advocate. You have to advocate for yourself. What's safe, what's comfortable, what's healthy, what's okay.
Yeah. So we have a special guest coming up, and it will be a professional talking about that is written on religious trauma. And so stay tuned for that next. And then after that, we have another special guest that we will tease about soon. Multiple, actually, that I'm pretty excited about. So we'll see you soon. Mwah. Bye.